my mom would give me 50 cents every day to buy a snack, and then I'd have like half an hour to buy a snack, usually a bag of popcorn, and play Street Fighter. But I got pretty good at the arcade, to the point that at the pizzeria I got beat up in real life for beating an older kid too many times.
Wow.
He was like, if you do that move again, I was using Guile, and I was doing some kind of cheap trick with Guile. And he was like, if you do that to me again, I'm going to kick your ass. And so I did, and then he turned to me and started beating on me. And so I remember, he punched me, like I got backed up against the pizza oven, my shoulder got burned, and then the Pete, the owner of Sacco Pizza on 54th and 9th, he broke up the fight, kicked the other kid out. And then he walked me back to my music school because the other kid was waiting out in the street for me.
If you're watching on YouTube, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment about the episode. And if you're watching on Spotify or listening on a traditional podcast platform, please follow, rate us 5 stars, and leave a review if you would be so kind. Thank you. Welcome to the Way to Know You podcast, Season 4, Episode 40. My name is Nick Rounds, and I will be your host. My next guest is a James Beard Award winner and the New York Times bestselling author of The Food Lab, Every Night is Pizza Night, and his latest book, The Walk. In addition to being known for having a GoPro strapped to his head while cooking, my guest is best known for breaking down the science and method of how to cook great food. When he's not busy riding his bike around Seattle and finding great new spots to grab a bite to eat, he's busy feeding table scraps to his dog, Hamon. Kenji López-Alt. Wait,
this is all accurate.
How are you today, sir?
I'm doing good. Oh, I didn't notice you have the Skeletor's castle back there.
Yeah, Snake Mountain. I have Gray Skull behind me as well.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, that's not the one that has the voice changing like wolf. No, that's the different one. Okay. Well, I had a version of his that had like a little wolf head that you could speak into and it changes your voice.
Yeah, that's Snake Mountain. So this is
it is okay.
Yeah, this is the Masters of the Universe Classic. So it's much more. The wolf head is right there, kind of.
Oh, right. All right.
Okay. But buzz off it. So it's not a microphone anymore. Like this is like a
reissue.
Yeah,
got it. Does it still have that little trap door in the back?
It does, yeah.
Yeah, with a little net underneath it.
Yeah, it has a trap door over here. I just have Skeletor on his bone throne.
Yeah, nice.
So, yeah,
one of my favorite toys. I don't remember when I got it. Must have got it from like 1987, 88, something like that. Nice. When I was a kid, yeah.
Well, starting there, actually. So you're known for food stuff, but I'm a game designer, and
cool. Yep.
The first thing I want to talk about to anybody usually is about video games. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is video games. So
sure.
You've been streaming the Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown. Is that it?
Yeah, I think that's what it's called. Yep.
Yeah. So I've been really enjoying those live streams. And I'd love to talk to you about that. Talk to me about your gaming, origin story. Where does your origin story for gaming begin?
Oh, it goes way, way back. So my grandfather was into sort of gadgets and stuff. He was a professional amateur magician. Professionally, he was an organic chemist, but he was into like toys and gadgets and all kinds of stuff. And so when I was a kid, I was born in 1979, and my earliest memories, I would go down to my grandfather's place, and he had a Atari 800. Which is, it looks like a big gray keyboard. It has a slot for a cartridge. He also had the tape deck. You could use regular cassette tapes as data storage. I think he had a hockey game that was stored on a cassette tape.
Nice.
I played games on the Atari 800. I think the earliest one I remember playing was a game called Crazy Shootout with a K. And then eventually my dad picked up a ColecoVision. And so that was like the first gaming system we had in our actual home, a ColecoVision. And on the ColecoVision, we would play games like Zaxxon. We would play Smurfs Adventure and Cabbage Patch Kids.
Nice.
And then finally, it must have been 1986, I think, is when it came out. In the US, we got the NES. It was the year that everybody in the US got the Nintendo. And we got the NES with the packaged zapper with the one cartridge with Super Mario and Duck Hunt on the same cartridge. And that was basically that was basically the beginning of the end for me as far as video games go. I've been a Nintendo kid ever since. I've had every Nintendo system. Not the portable ones. I had a Game Boy. I never had the DS or the 3DS, but every other every other Nintendo system I've owned and have enjoyed, and still to this day I have a Switch, and I still get all the new games and play them. Yeah, it's been fun, and and now I have my own 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, and they both love. My 6-year-old likes watching more than she likes playing, which is it's a strange thing to me that people just like to watch other people play video games, which was not. I guess you could do that from a couch, but it was fun to do because you could yell at each other, when I was a kid. But going online and watching a video game like you're watching TV, that's it was strange to me. But it's I get it. I guess it's something people enjoy doing. My kids like doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really weird, just like how thinking about like gaming culture in general wasn't really a thing when we were growing up. It was just like it was either you're into video games, and maybe you're lucky if your friends across the street like were into video games with you as well. But like the concept of a gamer just wasn't really a thing. It's just like you just played games, and if you're into games, you're into games.
Yeah, well, there certainly was like a sort of gaming group at school. Like when I remember like going into 3rd grade and sitting around lunch with a couple of the other kids who played video games, and I had Super Mario Brothers. I didn't have Contra, but my friend had Contra, and so I remember like swapping cartridges, and then of course there was no internet, so and games back then were a lot they hadn't figured out the modern systems of sort of guiding you through through in-game tutorials. So for example, like the original Legend of Zelda, you're just dropped in there, right? You had the instruction manual, which had kind of half a map of the overworld, but it didn't tell you any sort of secrets. You had to sort of figure everything out on your own. The classic example of that would be Simon's Quest, Castlevania 2, which I played through with my dad. There's this one really obscure thing where you got to pick up some kind of like red orb, and then you got to go to this one spot. And, you got to kneel there for like 5 seconds, and then suddenly, like a door opens up, and there's nothing in the game that really explains that. And I remember we were stuck in that part for days and days before my dad figured it out. And that was just like whoa, whereas these days, if I was stuck, I would just go to the internet and say, all right, what do I do for the next part? Or the game would presumably guide you a little bit more than old games did. But back then it was one person had like a subscription to Nintendo Power, and they were like the information spreaders in the school, and they could tell you all the secrets. So gaming, I felt it was a smaller community. It was just you and your nerdy friends sharing, comparing scores and sharing secrets and trading cartridges. I do remember, in order to my friend Jimmy, before he lent me that Contra console, Contra cartridge, I had to fulfill a dare, which was to drink. He made a drink for me. It was like Coke mixed with ketchup and mayonnaise and black pepper, and I had to drink the whole thing before he would lend me Contra.
Well, Contra is a pretty serious game. That sounds like a serious dare. That's hilarious. Yeah, I had a lot of fun memories playing through Contra with my dad. In addition to waiting for my Luigi turn on Super Mario Brothers, I played a lot of Contra with my dad, where we'd input the Konami code and just play through all the way through. Yep. Did you have any other notable like gaming experiences with your dad that's like really stick with you?
Yeah, my dad was really into what he called quest games, which are what we call RPGs now. But he was really into quest games. So, but both adventure, action, and adventure games, like Zelda. He was super into Zelda. So I remember playing through the original Legend of Zelda, but we played through the original Final Fantasy. We played through all of the Ultimate games and Dragon Warrior games that came out on the original NES. So I was really into RPGs for a while, and JRPGs in particular, through the end of sort of the SNES era. So my favorite game of all time, one of my favorite games of all time, is probably Final Fantasy VI, which was released as Final Fantasy III in the US. And Final Fantasy II was mind-blowing. When Final Fantasy II came out on the Super Nintendo, which was Final Fantasy V in Japan, but that one had full orchestration. It was really like it was the first sort of very cinematic game that I played. I remember playing it and talking with my sister. It's like, this was like playing a movie, and oh my God, like how much have games progressed since then? But it was the first game I remember where I was super invested in the story more than anything. And that's still one of my favorite games of all time. I kind of stopped playing the Final Fantasy games after 7. I played 7 when that came out, I think when I was finishing up high school. I played it in college on a PC on an emulator. And finished it, but I kind of stopped playing Final Fantasy games after that. Once it started getting a little bit more action oriented and a little bit less turn based, I'm sort of lost interest in it. They got a little too complicated for me. I don't know.
Yeah, same here for me.
But yeah, my dad's my dad's like welcoming line when I got home, when he would come home from work, or if I'd been or visiting, when he would come home from work, and he would come up to me, he's like, "Oh, hey Ken, like, did you beat the boss? Like, did you beat the boss?" Was his way of saying hello to me,
That's awesome.
whether there was a boss we were playing or not.
My dad used to call me the Wizard.
Oh yeah,
from the movie The Wizard.
yeah. Was Fred Savage, right? Was he in that? Or...
Yeah. Just because I got really good at like games like Adventure Island and like play through the crap like I was speed running those games when I was a kid.
Oh nice.
Which I didn't know what speed running was.
Right.
But it was a lot of fun. But so many fun memories.
The Wizard, that was the movie that introduced Super Mario 3. I remember when that came out.
Yeah, and then like
oh my god.
Yeah. That was such a magical era. And then like they show the Power Glove in that movie too.
Oh yeah.
Even though it's so crappy, it's just
the worst peripheral controller of all time.
Yeah. Second only to the track and field track that like barely picks up your footsteps.
Well, my friend had the track and field track, and we would play it by lying on the floor and pounding it with our fists. And the parts where you did like the high jump or the long jump, you could just jump off the side and then jump back on. My friend had that. The other controllers we had, I had a I don't remember what it was called, but it had instead of a D-pad, it had like a touch sensitive smooth, it was like laying on like a trackpad.
You know what you're talking about. Yeah, I remember.
It was awful. It didn't work. And then I did have a arcade style Street Fighter 2. I don't remember what it was called, but there was I think it was made by Nintendo. It was like an official Nintendo product, but it had a joystick with a ball top and the six buttons laid out like Street Fighter 2 for the Super Nintendo. So I used that to play Street Fighter 2 a lot.
Oh wow. That's awesome.
Although I played so much on the D-pad that I'm actually much better at Street Fighter 2 on the D-pad than I am with an arcade controller these days.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I much rather play with a D-pad than an arcade stick. Like
or even an analog stick. I find analog sticks to be really difficult for old school games.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't realize I suck at Street Fighter until I started working at Sony, and then I was playing against people that were like going to Evo every year and being I thought I was good at Street Fighter, and then I realized that there's people that can stunlock me forever.
I was good enough that I played at my local pizzeria. So there was a candy shop near my school. We would sometimes go to my mom would give me 50 cents every day to buy a snack, and then I'd have like half an hour to buy a snack, usually a bag of popcorn, and play Street Fighter. And the bags of popcorn were 25 cents, so I would save the other quarter to play Street Fighter. And if I was good enough, I could make it through the whole half hour on that one quarter. And then I would sometimes play at the pizzeria where I'd get $2 from my mom. I'd buy a slice of pizza, and then I'd have 50 cents left over, or 75 cents left over at the time to play Street Fighter. But I got pretty good at the arcade to the point that at the pizzeria I got beat up in real life for beating an older kid too many times.
Wow.
He was like, if you do that move again, I was using Guile, and I was doing some kind of cheap trick with Guile. And he was like, if you do that to me again, I'm going to kick your ass. And so I did, and then he turned to me and started beating on me. And at that time, the arcade console was right next to the back of the pizza oven. Which was hot like a pizza oven, and it just had like a little sign paint taped onto it that said hot. But whoever was on the right stick there would get their elbows burnt. And so I remember, he punched me, like I got backed up against the pizza oven, my shoulder got burnt, and then the Pete, the owner of Sacco Pizza on 54th and 9th, he broke up the fight, kicked the other kid out. And then he walked me back to my music school because the other kid was waiting down the street for me.
Wow, that's really intense. Was that in New York, or was that?
That was in New York. Yeah, that's in New York. Sacco Pizza, 54th and 9th. It's still there. Still one of my favorite slices in the city. Pete's son now makes the pizza there. And
you grew up mostly in New York, even though you're born in Boston, right?
I was born in Boston. My family moved to New York when I was 4.
Okay.
And then, I lived in New York through high school, but my dad moved back to Boston when I was 12 years old. So, I spent a lot of time sort of between Boston and New York growing up.
Cool.
And then I lived in Boston again for another 10 years after that.
And you mentioned that you've had every single Nintendo console. Does that include the Wii U as well?
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
Oh, nice. So walk me through like every version of Nintendo. Like let's talk about like the type of games that you played on each of those individual like consoles, as well, like your favorite ones on each console.
All right. Well, let's go through each one, and I'll just tell you the games that pop out and pop up into my memory. The
Yeah.
original NES, obviously Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt. I remember loving Goonies 2, Goonies Adventure 2,
Oh, nice.
which is a classic. I haven't played through it recently, but I do remember playing that game. That game didn't have any passwords, didn't have any saves, so you had to play it all through in one sitting. And it was a very long game. There was a time I got the flippers, I got the harpoon gun towards the end of the game. Left it on overnight, and my sister kicked it, and I had to and completely erase my game, and I had to start over. That was kind of devastating. I remember that.
That's brutal.
Also on the original NES, let's see. Oh, I loved Faxanadu. It was an action adventure sort of semi RPG adventure game. That one did have passwords. Of course, the Mega Man games. Let's see, on the Super Nintendo. I do remember there was a time when my grandmother was sick in the hospital, and so my mom actually left the three kids at home alone to go care for my grandmother for a couple days. She would come in obviously and at night and feed us and everything, but it was three of us kids at home alone with a brand new Super Nintendo, so we played through Super Mario World and got all 96 stars, 100%ed it
Nice.
during that time. I remember doing that. I completely forgot. Of course, the Legend of Zelda series. That's been among my favorite game series ever since the beginning. So the original Legend of Zelda, that blew, like, me and my dad were just like, whoa, like, you can just go anywhere, you can do anything. And discovering, like, oh, you burn this bush and you get these hearts, and obviously it all seems so quaint in retrospect because there's relatively little. It's like you got the raft and there's only like two places you could use it. You got the little step ladder and there's very few places you could use it. But so in retrospect, it's kind of primitive, obviously, but it was the groundwork for open world games. And then A Link to the Past, when that one came out, like, I remember going and getting that for Christmas and just like, back then I would read through the entire instruction manuals. I would discipline myself. I can't start playing the game until I read through all of the instruction manuals. I'm going to pop the game in before I do anything with the controller. I'm going to let it go through all of its pre-game cutscenes, watch what happens, like, as the because in Link to the Past, like, the twirling Triforce comes in, and then there's probably a minute of waiting, and then it goes through all the preamble and the story. And so I would always watch all those things before I was allowed to start playing.
Man, that's one thing I really miss from like the old school like games, is like the actual gaming, like the actual guides and everything.
Yeah.
Being able to look at it, everything, especially like with Legend of Zelda, because you get a preview of like all the enemies ahead of time. And that's one thing I just really miss, and like the art for those are just so amazing.
Oh yeah, it's like a little comic book.
Yeah. Yeah, and talking to past guests, Stefan Reese, like he has a really like huge collection of Nintendo Power stuff, and some of the original art of like Legend of Zelda stuff like just blows me away.
Oh yeah,
I love that kind of stuff.
Oh man, I remember when Super Mario Brothers 2 came out. The reskin of Doki Doki Panic came out, and the cover of Nintendo Power there was a clay model of Mario holding a radish over his head. But it was like a claymation style thing. It was they did a lot. They put a lot of work into that art.
So it's funny you mentioned that, because like some of those clay models actually still exist, and Stefan has.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
So like, I don't know if you like the Professor Wiley, where he's like in the thing or whatever, like that clay model. Like, he has that.
Oh wow.
Like, so like he has a track and field shoes, like. So if you ever get a chance, he's usually like retro game shows.
Okay.
But it's like it's called The Art of Nintendo Power, and you can see that stuff in person, like the Dracula's head, where it's like there was like a big controversy where he was decapitated. Stefan has like the mask, that Dracula mask specifically.
Oh wow, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's just like just a whole bunch of nostalgia. When I first saw.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, when I first saw his collection, I was completely blown away by seeing everything that was in there.
That sounds awesome.
So
we skipped the Game Boy. So I had a Game Boy also. That, obviously Tetris, and I remember going on trips, and we had the game, the Link. I don't remember what the name of the Link cable is called. Maybe it's just called the Link cable. But doing head-to-head Tetris was big for me. Let's see, going on. Other SNES games, all the Final Fantasy games, obviously Final Fantasy 2 and 3. 3 came out right at, I think, towards the end of the SNES life cycle. But that was an awesome game. And then what was after the SNES? Was that the N64? Yeah, you know, my first experience with the N64 was renting it from Blockbuster. And spending 10 minutes just pinching Mario's face and moving it around.
So good.
Yeah, the N64 early days of 3D, you go back and play it, it's very, very difficult to play these days. Very hard to play.
Yeah, because they didn't have their head wrapped around the controller, like the camera controls.
That's man, go back and try and play GoldenEye now or Perfect Dark. It's real hard. But yeah, GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, those are I loved those games. From there, GameCube, I got that when I was in college. The one game that completely stands out is Wind Waker. Wind Waker's, Zelda. Wind Waker is still one of my favorite. I think probably my favorite Zelda game. Maybe Breath of the Wild now, but I loved the art style. I loved the gameplay. I even liked the stealth levels, the fortress that some people complain about the stealth levels. I love sneaking around in barrels. I thought it was a fantastic game and still love it. And let's see, after GameCube, we're down. Then we're up to the Wii, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember, Wii was sort of, I got that when I was a cook, post college, I think. And Wii, obviously the Zelda games again, and the new Mario games, Mario Galaxy. Mario Galaxy, I remember being one of the first Marios where it felt, the sort of the end game levels were pretty challenging. There were some good challenges in there at the end, some real good 3D platforming challenges that I don't think were matched until maybe, the new Super Mario Brothers series. Some of those end game levels were real difficult. But Mario Galaxy was a lot of fun, super unique. There was a game called that was an early Wii game called Boom Blocks, which was basically
the one that Steven Spielberg actually.
Yeah, Steven Spielberg. Yep. But it was basically like a Jenga, but with more modes, and you played it on your screen. I remember that one just like playing with my roommates, and it was like, oh my god, like the physics are just like awesome in this, and again, that feels quaint now because the physics were just like blocks bumping into each other.
Well, I mean, there's something to be said about even simple game. I mean, like Tetris, for God's sakes, like it's just like a simple block puzzle game, but it's so iconic. And anything that puts a player into a flow state, like people that play pinball that get into a flow state where they're only thinking about the game and that's it. Like that's magic. Like that's gamer magic for sure. So
yeah. Well, Boom Blocks, I feel like was one of those great games for introducing, for playing with people who aren't gamers. It's like I could play with friends who didn't play regular video games. I played with my grandfather, and he at the time he had not played any games beyond Atari. So he didn't know anything more than a single 8-way joystick and a 1-button controller, and he was able to play Boom Blocks. He was able to play Wii Sports. So yeah, we definitely took advantage of the Wii, and they designed it that way, obviously, and I thought it was great. Another great party game, great family game was the WarioWare series for I don't remember what the one on Wii was called, but I think the Wii Wario game was the best of the Wario party games because it was so what they had you do with the controller was so unique. Compared, like the Switch one. The first one that came out, the Switch one, you just use the controller like a regular controller, which is not as fun, I find. I haven't played the new one. I think the new one's called Move It. Is that right? I haven't played the new one, so maybe that solves some of those issues.
But, I picked it up from Pink Gorilla. It's pretty fun, but yeah, I definitely agree that it's not nearly as fun as the Wii one is, just because like with the motion controls and like the way that you hold it already, like they expect you to use it in wacky ways, and they just let you use it in the same way since. But those type of twitchy games are super fun, so definitely agree.
Yeah. And then Wii U, not a ton of great stuff on Wii U. I actually played Twilight Princess on the Wii, and then I played Breath of the Wild first on the Wii U. So I guess that was like, that was the one great game I played on Wii U, but it's better on Switch. I bought it again for Switch, and I find it better. Yeah, the Wii U. Yeah. It's a notoriously a failed product, and for good reason. It was. I don't know. Not too much to say about the Wii U. It has some nice emulators. It still is the only place I can play Wind Waker right now at home. And luckily I downloaded that before they closed the Wii U shop. So I can still at least play Wind Waker. because I don't know where my GameCube went. I still have all the games, but the GameCube disappeared somewhere, I think post college. And then Switch I think has been Switch has been awesome. I really, Nintendo, after the N64 era, when they decided, no, we're not going to compete with Sony and Microsoft on as far as power and graphics and all that goes, and we're really just going to focus on gameplay and first party games and fun game modes and controllers. Like, I think it was absolutely the right move, and it's what's kept me interested in Nintendo all these years later. It feels like I feel like I'm like kindred spirits with Miyamoto. It's felt fun since the beginning, and I feel the leadership there has been consistent in really emphasizing the funness of Nintendo. And for me, games are all about having fun. I never really got into sort of the more hardcore, like first person shooters and stuff like that you would find on the Xbox and the PlayStation. I was much more into the sort of funner Nintendo style games.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for entertaining that question. It was
I can go on forever if you want.
No, it was super fun. Well, you have a hard out, sir, so I got to make sure I respect that. But speaking of other things that people hardly ever ask you about, well, this is relatively new, but I wanted to ask this because I went sober in all of 2019 and I fell off the wagon in 2020. But sobriety is something that's an important subject to me, and I think that's an important subject for anybody that's especially in the food service industry as well, just because it's so, especially if you're a bartender or anything like that, like it's going to come up and be part of your life.
I mean, substance abuse is rampant in the food industry.
So talk to me about sobriety. Like why, first of all, congrats. I just want to say congrats on that. But what made you decide to make that change?
Well, I like alcohol, right? I started drinking in college, and basically since the time I was 19 years old until 100 days ago when I quit drinking, there was not really a day that went by that I didn't have a drink, at least not by choice. Like in college, sometimes I couldn't afford it or I couldn't buy it because I didn't have an ID or whatever. But basically, any day that I could have had a drink, I would have a drink. And so, I wasn't like I wasn't like a sloppy drunk, or I didn't get DUIs or get into trouble or anything like that. But I drank steadily. I had like at least a couple of drinks every single day. And, so for me, and then what I found was that even days where I said to myself, hey, like today I'm not going to drink, I just couldn't do it. Like night would come and I'd be like, and I would eventually give in and just have a beer or two. Even if it was a beer or two, I needed to drink every day. And so part of it was like, I didn't like that feeling of, not having control over this one part of my life. And that's something I felt, even when I was in college, I told friends of mine, like, I'm worried I'm going to be an alcoholic. Like I'm not going to be able to control this. And turns out I was right. I wasn't able to control it. And then it's also like, once I had kids, especially, it's like alcohol shortens your life, right? There's not really any debate about that. Alcohol shortens your life. It's not good for you, basically in any quantity. Despite what wine industry people will try and tell you, it's not good for you in any quantity. And I want to live longer for my kids. So that was a lot of the motivating factor to really start being serious about this. And then I want to be around longer. So for several years after my daughter's 6 now, and for the last 6 years, I was trying to quit alcohol. I managed successfully for a while, but only by replacing it with marijuana. And so I wanted to cut out all those things from my life. And after unsuccessfully trying it on my own and unsuccessfully trying it with the help of therapists and with the help of prescription drugs and everything, none of that worked for me. And I finally thought, okay, maybe I'll try AA. It seems to work for people. And I was very anti-AA, not anti-AA, but very skeptical of it because, because it has those sort of spiritual and religious connotations. Sometimes it feels a little culty, and so I was very skeptical of it. But nothing else had worked for me, and turns out this works. So I'm 100 days sober now. I can say that for people who are thinking, who want to go sober, who want to quit drinking alcohol, and are considering AA, it is not easy, and the beginning is especially difficult. It actually wasn't until probably a couple weeks ago that I really felt, oh, okay, like where there's this like light switch moment where I was like, okay, this is working. In fact, quitting drinking, for the first 90 days, it made my life worse. Because what you find, at least if you're an alcoholic like I am, what you find is that the reason I drank was because I had anxiety issues. I couldn't sleep at night because I would worry about things. I would think about things. It made it really difficult. And so every night I was feeling anxious, and drinking a couple of beers would take that edge off, allow me to, what I would do is I would go drink a couple of beers while I cook. I would take my mind off things, basically every night. Really the drinking was just my way of escaping problems, And so when I quit drinking, through the help of my sponsor and through the help of AA, the drinking stopped, but the problems are still there. And now I just have one less tool in my bag to deal with those problems. Like I can't use the alcohol anymore to deal with those problems. So the problems don't go away. It's just the drinking does. And so for a long time, things were more difficult. I was proud of myself for having quit drinking, and I was like, okay, I'm making the right move. This is the right thing to do for my kids. This is the right thing to do for my own health. But you really need to put in the work to start to understand what was the cause of those problems, what the root cause of those problems is, and how to deal with those problems in more healthy and effective long-term ways than just having a drink. So for me, it's like AA, part of it is quitting drinking, but really the quitting drinking is kind of just tangential to all of it. It's really a way to help yourself identify and come to terms with problems you have in your life, and be honest with yourself and be honest with other people about all this stuff. It's like therapy. It really is extremely helpful, and has helped me think about life in a different way, think about my problems in a different way. It's also made me realize that a lot of the problems that I thought were unrelated to drinking are related to drinking. Issues that you have, interpersonal relationships that you might have with friends, or with your family, or with your loved ones, or with your spouse. Those are the types of problems that they feel like a separate problem, but in reality, the reason those problems go on and on is because you never deal with the root cause. At least for me, I never dealt with the root causes of them, because it's much easier just to say, I'm going to put this off until tomorrow. I'm going to have a beer right now. That way I don't have to think about it now, and I'll put it off till the next day. And then the problem just snowballs. Whereas when you quit drinking and you're forced to come to terms with all this stuff, you realize, okay, like the reason these problems aren't being solved is because I wasn't putting in the work to solve them. And now that I'm not drinking, I have the mental clarity and the some of the tools to actually start solving those problems. And that takes time, as anyone who is in AA will tell you, it's not like you do it and you're done. It's constant work. It's very fulfilling and satisfying, and often joyful work, but it's constant work. It's been a major, probably the biggest change I've ever made in my life. If you are, anybody listening to this is thinking about sobriety, or thinking about reconsidering their relationship with alcohol or drugs, I would highly recommend looking into AA, and just just kind of like any kind of relationship, there's AA meetings all over, everywhere, lots of them, and you got to find the one that fits you. I kind of shopped around, went to a few different ones before I found a group that I was comfortable with. So don't write it off right off the bat. And also, if you're listening to this and you feel you're on the fence about it, you reach out to me via social media, drop a comment on one of my YouTube videos and ask me about it, and I will be happy to respond and talk to you. I don't check my DMs on Instagram, but I do check any live comments. So if you comment on like a YouTube video, or on an Instagram post or something like that, and say, hey, I want to talk about alcohol, I will be happy to reach out and talk to you about it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I realized I had a problem when I was dealing with a breakup and using alcohol to kind of deal with it that way, and realized I didn't like who I was at the time. But yeah, I like what you said about specifically about realizing that the problems don't go away when the alcohol is still there, and that that it's the amount of clarity that you get when you're actually sober is just night and day. Like, I think the biggest thing that I noticed is just like how much my face wasn't as puffy and bloated.
Yes.
That's the thing that's like one of the number one things when you start going sober. You're like, what? I didn't realize my face was that puffy.
Oh yeah. I mean, certainly people who watch my videos, I'm sure notice it. That I lost weight before I went sober. Like I did make like a concerted effort this past year to bike more and to manage my eating a little more. So I lost something like 25 pounds before I even started going sober. But certainly, like I feel like I can tell easily sort of I don't know, my skin, the puffiness, like my skin has a better sort of glow to it. And the number of people like in the last 100 days who've said, oh, like, are you like aging in reverse? Like what happened to you? Like you look like your skin looks so good. Like you look so healthy. It's like, nah, I just quit drinking.
No, you look really good. But yeah, again, congrats. And thank you so much for sharing your story with me.
No, well, thanks for asking.
Yeah, it's super important. And yeah, especially somebody who's like in a public forum like you, I think it's super exciting to talk about that kind of stuff just because people know you for your late night cooking videos where you might have come home from karaoke a little bit sauced, but
Yep.
Yeah, it's important to tell the full story about like, everybody's relationship with alcohol and like how it changes and what's healthy for your life and what's not. So
yeah, when you're speaking of that, that was one of the things I really struggled with is that as someone in the food industry, well, first of all, someone who owned a beer hall for a while, that was a lot of trouble because that I could drink for free at my own place and I could go in there afterwards, bring my computer with me. I could, I wrote a book from the bar there, basically, drinking drinking really strong IPAs while writing a book at my own bar, which is not a good thing for an alcoholic to be doing. Yep, that one. Actually, it was my children's book I wrote. Well, both, I guess a little bit of both, but
nice.
But also it's like my late night drunk half-ass food videos are among the most popular things on my channel. They're not like the biggest money makers. It's like they're not like that essential to sort of my financial well-being because they're short, but they are the most popular stuff on my channel. It's like I made a sandwich once and it has like whatever 12 million, I don't know how many views, but tens of millions of views. And people always say like, oh, you should do more of those videos. It's like, I need to be drunk or high or whatever it is to make those videos. So I'm not going to be making those anymore. And it definitely was like, man, if I quit drinking, does that mean I'm going to lose this thing that people want me to do? And it's also like, wine and beer and beverages are such a huge part of the food industry. It's like, if I quit drinking, am I crippling myself by doing that? And, and it's one of those things where I kind of just like, yeah, you know what, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Like I have to take my own health and the health of my family and my relationships are far more important than making people who want to see me drunk happy, strangers on the internet who want to see me drunk, than making them happy. So I kind of just jumped off that cliff, took the leap of faith that it would be okay. And luckily it turns out like right now is a great time to be going sober because of the sheer quantity and quality and diversity of non-alcoholic beverage offerings going on right now. The number of like non-alcoholic spirits, and in Seattle now there's a bottle shop called Cheeky and Dry that just opened that is a 100% alcohol-free bottle shop that has a full selection of like alcohol-free beers, wines, spirits, just all kinds of stuff. And it's crazy how good some of this stuff is. Like I can drink something that tastes just like a Negroni. And I can drink two of them, have a few non-alcoholic beers, and then drive everyone home afterwards and feel good about it, and wake up at 5:45 the next morning when my kid, wants to get out of bed, and I think that's great. I know non-alcoholic beverages doesn't work for everyone. Some people, it's a trigger for some people who are trying to quit drinking, but they work really well for me, and I've really enjoyed sort of exploring that world.
That's awesome. So I want to be respectful of your time.
Sure.
Yeah. You're starting a new podcast yourself pretty soon, right?
Yeah.
It's called The Recipe with Kenji and Deb. How did that podcast become to be?
It's called The Recipe. Well, I call it The Recipe with Deb and Kenji. They changed the name to The Recipe with Kenji and Deb against my will. But anyhow, Deb is Deb Perlman, who is the founder of Smitten Kitchen, one of the original food blogs. It's been around since 2005 or 2006. So she and I have sort of been running in the same circles for decades now, because we were both in New York, right? Writing recipes online. But we had never met each other until last year when she came to to Seattle as part of her book tour for her third book. It's a book called Smitten Kitchen Keepers. It's wonderful. But she asked if I would host her at her book event here And so I did, and we spent, we had an hour to talk on stage, and we ended up talking for like almost 2 hours, because it turns out like once two recipe writers begin talking, we could talk about recipes forever. And so we were thinking, it was just such a fun conversation. We had so much fun talking with each other. The audience seemed to love it. And both of us, like, we have a ton of experience in this field. We've both written cookbooks. We've both been writing online for years and years, but we both have very different perspectives. And so we thought it would be really fun to sort of talk about recipes and how we approach recipes from different angles. So each episode of the show focuses on a single recipe that both of us have written. So, for example, yesterday we recorded an episode on tomato soup. And she has a tomato soup recipe. I have a tomato soup recipe. They're different from each other. They both have the same goal, but we came up with completely different recipes at the end. In fact, they both have almost identical ingredients, but they're very different. And so I think it's fascinating talking about what she was thinking when she was developing her recipe, what I was thinking when I was developing mine. It's kind of pulling back the curtains and showing people what goes into writing a recipe, because I think people have I remember telling someone once a while back, like, they asked me what I do. I was like, I'm a recipe writer, and they're like, oh, so what do you like? You like you go into restaurants and follow the chef around and write down what they're doing? It's like, no, that's not really what a recipe writer does. But it's hard to explain what a recipe writer does, and so I think this show will hopefully show people a little bit of what the work that goes into writing a recipe, and we're also hoping, of course, that, as always, like, our goal is to empower home cooks. And so by hearing about how we developed recipes and what thought went into them, we're hoping that people will, then be able to take recipes and tweak them for their own, or be able to design their own recipes from scratch. So yeah, that's the show. It premieres February 26th, I believe, is the first episode coming out. It's going to be about macaroni and cheese, and it'll be coming out every 2 weeks after that.
Cool. Yeah, this episode will be out on the 22nd of, so it'll be right before your.
All right, yeah. So premieres in 4 days. Yeah. The recipe with Kenji and Deb, or the recipe with Deb and Kenji.
Officially. Awesome. Kenji, it's been really fun to talk to you. I wish I could talk to you for longer, but I've been really enjoying talking. We barely even talked about food stuff, and of course that's what everybody wants to talk to you about.
I talk about food stuff all the No, I'm so grateful actually that you asked me to talk about video games and sobriety, because I talk about food all the time, but those video games especially is something I love, and I never get a chance to talk about it. Part of the reason I started streaming was like, I like video games, and people like video games. Maybe I'll I'll start sharing some of that. I don't ever really talk about my love for video games, but I've been a gamer for as long as I can remember. So at least 40 years.
Yeah, I didn't realize that you were a gamer until you were posting about Metroid Dread. I was like, oh, that's awesome that he plays. So yeah, like the second that you mentioned that you're doing your Let's streams with Prince of Persia and that stuff like that, I was like, man, I want to talk to Kenji about games. It seems like a lot of fun, fun topic to dive into.
I think I'm going to make it a regular Thursday night. I'll stream on Thursday nights going forward, and I think I'm actually going to probably put a pin in Prince of Persia, and what I'll do is I'll stream some of my favorite, retro games. So I'll go back to some of the 2D platformers and those original NES games and SNES games, because it'll be a good excuse for me to play through all those games again, because I haven't played some of them in years.
That's really exciting. Cool. Well, Kenji, before we take off, is there anything that you'd like to plug besides your podcast, besides this book, besides you've got 2 events coming up too soon as well, right? Like a SIF cinema event, and then
I got a bunch of events coming up. Yeah, I'm doing a thing with Eric Kim, who's the author of Korean American, also a colleague at the New York Times, but he's coming to Seattle March 14th. We're doing an event at Town Hall if you're in Seattle. I'm doing a guest film night with SIF with the I always forget what SIF stands for. It's SIF Cinema. What does it stand for? Seattle
International Film Forum. Or
there
something
he is. Yeah. Seattle International Film Forum. But I'm hosting a movie night at the Egyptian Theater coming up. So if you go to SIF Cinema and look for my name, we will announce that soon. I haven't picked the movie yet, but I will be soon. And then June 29th, we're going to be doing a big show. Me and some folks from the Seattle Chamber Music Society are going to be doing a big show at Benaroya Hall, the Symphony Space. In Seattle, June 29th. That's going to be a show about the sort of intersection of music and food, and what the two fields have in common, both in terms of sort of technical, they're both things that are very technical and also artistic. And so it's going to be exciting. There's going to be some of the greatest musicians in the world are going to be performing. I get to play a little music with some of them, which is going to be really fun. I'll be cooking live on the stage there, along with some of these musicians. We're going to be having some guest chefs. Our goal is to set up a mini restaurant line in there and show you sort of live what a restaurant service is like. So I think it'll be a really fun show. I think the connections between food and music are really fascinating. So if you've never thought about that, it might be an interesting show for you as well. So yeah, that's what's going on as far as live events.
Awesome. Kenji, thank you so much for your time. It was an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, same to you. Thanks so much for having me.
Everybody else, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.